Hey guys, how's it going? Venture Investing here today. So today we're going to be talking about Virgin Galactic. They just last week released their Q3 2023 earnings here. Stock over the last while, it's been getting hammered pretty hard. We saw quite a big jump. I think it was over 20% on Thursday. Friday, we saw it fall back a little bit. So we're sitting around a $715 million market cap right now. Initially, I had a pretty bearish view of these earnings, but after going through them, going through the conference call, all the slides, I have some pretty good insights to show you regarding that. But before we get into that, we're just going to get into the quick top line items in terms of their financials here. So, like I said, this is Q3 2023. And I have from Q4 2022, Q1 23, Q2, Q3. So we can kind of see sequentially here. Now, revenue is $1.7 million. Slightly down from last quarter, but definitely a marketable improvement from these ones as well. Net income loss has narrowed a little bit, $104 million loss. We were seeing bigger losses before that. Cash has remained pretty similar to where it was before. It's actually increased to a little over $1 billion or so. They're saying, I believe we'll get to it, that's about 1.1 billion, but I think they include restricted cash and things like that. So not much revenue, still a strong cash balance, but of course they did some dilution during the quarter as well, but we'll get into that as well. Now, going to the agenda here, we talked about what was going to happen, but he also opened the call with 4 key things. So he said we had 6 space flights in under 6 months with Unity. So we'll talk about that. For 6 months, we're not seeing a significant amount of revenue, but that's because a lot of these space flights are going to be shown in forward quarters just due to do with timing. Also, we had, of course, lower ticket sales. And we also had, astronaut trainers, things like that, but we'll get into that a little bit as well. So that it was a pretty significant thing if you've been watching them lately, that we've had 6 space flights in 6 months. But looks like that's going to be slowing down, but we're going to get into that as well. To talk about the customer experience, the next slide here, they gave a lot of specific quotes and such of people who thought it was so amazing and such, of course. They also talked about the advances in the Delta, which is their next generation spacecraft. So they're saying this could fly about 8 times per month. So that's a much faster cadence, of course, than Unity. We'll get into that a little bit more as well. And the big one as well is they projected that their quarter end cash reserves are going to be sufficient. So meaning this quarter, they're going to be sufficient to bring these 2 first Delta ships into service. And they're expecting positive free cash flow by 2026, which is, given today's market conditions, pretty important thing to do. Like I said here, we went through some of the quotes and such like that. If you want to pause it here, you can read some of them. Is what it is there. Then we're we're going right into the Delta class spacecraft. So this next slide here has quite a bit of information here. We have the 2nd generation, of course. This is Unity. They're saying they're going to skip the 3rd generation altogether. So they're going to be skipping the 3rd generation, and they're going to go straight to Delta. And the ground testing for Delta is going to begin in 2025, and revenue services are going to begin in 2026. In terms of Unity, what we have right now, which has 4 seats, they spoke about how the cost exceeded the modest monthly revenue. So the revenue per flight, they're saying about 1.8 to 2.4 million. We're not seeing that, of course. We have higher than that when we have research, because at current prices in the 450,000, research is 600K per seat. But given timing, given different people being on board, we haven't seen that. But they're saying about 1.8 to 2.4 million dollars per flight, and we're going to have only one of those a month. So the revenue per month, of course, will be 1.8 to 2.4 million. Next generation, which we're going to be pushing towards here fast, they're saying about 2.7 to 3.6 million, and they're going to be able to do 8 million. So that could be generating revenue of 21.6 to 28.8 million dollars per month. Wouldn't that be nice, right? So they're saying the revenue improvement over Unity is about 12x. Estimated life is about 500 flights. So I think that gives them about a 6-month payback period. And each ship is going to cost them about 50 to 60 million dollars rather. We talked about this over here a little bit as well, and we talked about them skipping. So if they could follow this. This might be, relatively significant here. We'll get into what's going to be happening with Unity and what's going to be happening to Delta in a sec here. They talked about the Virgin Galactic space ship factory that is coming along. Also, they talked about the test platforms for the next generation coming up, different interiors as well as a seat. So not a lot of information here. This is where we're going to get a lot more information as to what's going on here. So they opened this slide with saying that they expect near-term uncertainty in capital markets to continue, i.e. high interest rates, geopolitical issues, stuff like that. And they're going to be focusing their company resources towards Delta. They're going to be reducing net spending within the Spaceline operations, which is good. So that's probably why we saw the stock go up. Spaceline operations encompasses some different expenses as well. So we will talk about what that is as well. There's some good information there as well. Unity's flight cadence is moving to quarterly versus monthly. So Galactic 6 will be in January. They expect the revenue per flight to be about $2 to $2.5 million for Galactic 6 and Galactic 7. And one more seat is going to be, so the reason for this is one more seat is going to be available because the astronaut instructor is not going to be there, and also to do with the mix being that they are going to have more research versus just an astronaut. And they're also going to be opening up, this is interesting as well, maybe a lot of people are not talking about this, they're also going to be opening up a seat for premium. So premium meaning if there's a seat available within that manifest, they're going to be pricing these closer to $1 million. So it's going to be interesting to see the timing of that when that comes in, and how long can you have that premium price for those seats, like $1 million per seat in this environment. But I guess this is just for rich people anyway, of course. So Unity's revenue per flight, of course, is going to be increasing substantially in Q3, Q4. So guidance is probably going to reflect that as well. Number 2 here, Spaceline technical and engineering talent are going to be focusing on Delta. So mid-2024, they're going to be pausing Unity. It sounds like they're not 100% sure when they're going to be pausing it, but they're going to be focusing their resources on the final assembly of the Delta ship. So this feels like a little bit of a double-edged sword to me. We're going to have significantly more revenue because of what they're doing, because of how they're streamlining, and when Delta comes in. But I think that there's going to be a period where we're going to have no revenue as well. So how's the stock going to respond to that? Delta flight tests are planned for mid-2025 from Spaceport America. We talked about this as well. So there's going to be that little gap there. We see mid-2024 into 2026, what's going to be going on between there when they're going to be ramping into Delta, and then Delta is going to be starting in 2026, right? So, and can they even hold that timeline? I don't know. New ships as well, mothership rather. They're saying this is going to be ramping into 2027. Mike Moses is going to be expanding his role as the president of Virgin Galactic Spaceline. Also, number 5 here, they should have had another one. And I think this is one of the reasons that the stock went up quite a bit. There's going to be some job cuts. So going into 2024, they're going to have about 844 full-time employees. But there's going to be a $5 million cost associated with this restructuring. We saw a lot of this, like with Facebook, companies like that had these big restructuring costs because it costs money to do that kind of stuff, right? But I think anything related to cost savings in this environment are being, hailed as something that's amazing. So maybe that's why we saw the stock responding to the way it was. So going on to the next here, now we're going into financial results. We didn't went over the top line kind of stuff, but they spoke a little bit more about some other things as well. Before I start on this, something very important to note if you're following the financials of this company is about Spaceline operations. So that's a line item on the income statement and expense. These are costs that can't be capitalized when they're building fixed assets. So some of these costs can be, under R&D, SG&A, but now these are going to be logged as expenses in the income statement there. So, like I said, these were previously SG&A or research and development. Now there's a portion of this that has to be expensed into this baseline operation. So that's something to keep in mind going forward. In terms of revenue, like I said, we had about revenue of $1.7 million compared to $800,000 in the previous year. So this was driven by commercial space flights and membership fees, of course, normal. Total operating expenses were $116 million versus $146 million in the prior year. This is primarily driven to lower R&D expenses. But the reason that we had that, which is good cost savings, spaceline operations were $26 million. So this is what we're talking about here, is $26 million. R&D was down $45 million, SG&D was $42 million, so they were less than the previous quarter. So some of this reduction is because, like I said, it went into spaceline operations. So that was some of that. So if you saw these going down, it's not necessarily that the R&D was going down or this SG&A was going down. It's just that they're reclassifying it different as well. Net loss of $105 million versus $146 million the prior year. So we saw an improvement there, but some of this was due to with interest income from the marketable securities, higher interest rates. So it's kind of a double-edged sword on this one, right? Adjusted EBITDA of a negative $87 million versus $129 million loss in the prior year quarter. Free cash flow, about a loss of $105 million versus $102 million in the prior year period. And they raised $211 million in gross proceeds through 62 million shares of common stock. So we see some more dilution there. I expect to see more of that going forward. They're saying near term, not necessarily something that they're going to have to do. But I think we're going to see that. They still have, I believe we're going to talk about it here as well. Yeah, a little bit later here about what they have still available in terms of tapping equity. They might get into that. We'll talk about that. Again, they always like to talk about the cash equivalents, sequential increase of $108 million from the prior year quarter. I don't think it's quite 1.1 billion. I'm not too sure what they classify in there. They're always slightly higher than what it's actually showing. I think we're talking about restricted cash, stuff like that. Financial outlook. So the guidance for Q4 is going to be about $3 million, which is good, which is a huge improvement. This is going to be primarily due to two space flights. That's going to be the Galactic 4 and Galactic 5 that are going to be in there. Q4 cash flow guidance is going to expect to be in the range of a negative $125 million to $135 million. There's some timing things in here. The reason that that's a little bit higher. So, going forward, it's nice to see the higher revenue, but it's still a $700 million company that's only generating $3 million a quarter. We'll see going forward here. This is kind of I found it a little bit confusing the way they put this. It kind of gives you a visual representation of how things are going to go going forward. They talked about how their operating expenses here, as you can see, are going to be slightly less going into 2024. Capital expenses are going to be higher. And then going into 2026 here, we're expecting to see, of course, the cash flow from flights to increase significantly and capital expenditures to go down. Again, we talked about $50 to $60 million per ship build, but they're saying a 75% contribution margin. So, wow, and paying that back in less than 6 months. If we get there, that could be quite significant. But again, about the cash, they stated that they still have about $113 million equity offering still available. They're saying they're not going to have to use this in the near term, but I expect that they're going to have to tap that. So this is the last slide I got here. There wasn't too much more in the conference call that they didn't really cover during this presentation. There was a lot of information, which is good. So still, I think the stock is going to be under some pressure because if they need to tap the equity markets beyond this $113 million that they have, it might be difficult in this environment. Anything could go wrong. But the one thing that I didn't mention about this quarter, when we go back up here, was that this was higher. They were saying about, I believe last quarter the guidance was about $1 million. So they beat that. So giving us $3 million going forward, looks like we're on the right track. But still, the valuation of this company is still pretty dang rich for what they have and the market that we're in right now. And I have a little bit of a concern with that, that's that gap there between when we stop flights with Unity and we're trying to get into Delta. But I would love to know what you guys think about that. Maybe there's something I'm missing there. Maybe they're going to be generating a little bit more revenue there when we have that pause. Maybe not. Regardless, it was actually a better quarter than I expected. Love to know what you guys think. Don't forget to like the video, guys. Subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.